Hey, Albert, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Asher. It's like an anniversary.
Yeah, it's crazy when you were saying it's almost to the day a year later that we're speaking again.
Yeah, so we scheduled this for 2 days ago. It was the exact same day, 1 year forward, which is crazy, really, in a certain sense. I don't know if you put meaning into things like that, but I do.
Yeah, I mean, given our last conversation when we talk about the you got to remind me of the term, the third
Third
touch.
universe.
Yeah, third
Yeah.
touch of the universe. I'm like, it it kind of went, but then those echoes kind of reverberate back and to introduce you to the audience in case they haven't listened to that episode. But who do you say you are?
Who do I say I am?
Yes, sir.
I usually say that I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. Never had a real job. I've been surviving by my wits since starting a college business at LSU back in the 1980s. And, that entrepreneurial journey, you think of that as being about business and things like that. But really, what it ended up being about was just to help me discover who I was. And in an odd way, it sort of meandered until I really discovered that I love teaching. I love teaching, I love sharing, and that really led to me being, and I didn't even like this word at first because there's so many of them out there, but I ended up being like a coach and a mentor to people. And really all it really means is that I've just taken the sum of my life experience and the using the tools that use personally to be able to grow into the position to do the things I was doing. You know, those kind of like those hurdles that you have to jump through, the way you have to grow in order to achieve certain things. I needed tools and I needed practices and processes to be able to function effectively. And so the ones that I liked, I just started sharing with friends, and then eventually those friends became clients. And and then I had a proof of concept. I was like, oh, okay, well, this doesn't just work for me; it worked for this other person too. So this is really good information. I shouldn't sit on it. I should share it. At some point, I realized I cannot just happily and joyfully go about my business sitting on what I've learned. There's just like a something inside of me just compelled to find ways to share it to benefit others. And that's really the space that I've been in for the last 12 years. Uh, yeah, of doing that, and still doing the other businesses too to make a living,
Right.
but with the urge to yeah, share the wisdom, like, and so people can. Here's the beauty, no one needs a coach, no one needs a therapist, no one needs somebody to save them. No, in that sense, you don't need it because life will teach it to you on its own.
Mm.
So as a teacher, as a coach, right? Uh, no one really needs my help. They can just go out and let life teach them. But if you're the kind of person who likes shortcuts or likes to avoid, the hard way, well, then, go learn your lessons through someone else who's already learned them and
Yeah.
can kind of help steer you, about which things are just obvious things to avoid. So it's like a wise person chooses to go learn from the wisdom of others instead of, paying the full price of learning the hard way. You're on your own. And
Right.
and I'm personally a person like that, it's like, okay, yeah, I don't need to learn every hard lesson myself, Now, of course, the hard lessons are the ones that stick the most. And
Mhm.
then ironically, those are the ones you probably are going to share to help other people the most. Uh, but yeah, I wanna take the easy route.
Yeah. There's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
It's yeah, I can definitely identify with that. Like you said, when you said you've been going 12 years strong, is that have you have the last 12 years been more productive for you having a proof of concept system, or what's made the last 12 years special?
So you would think, okay, you know these things or whatever, and you know the stuff works. Does it mean you use it all the time? No, absolutely not.
Mm,
Something I guess in the human makeup, we can know exactly what to do and not do it.
mm.
As a matter of fact, most people probably know what they should do,
Yeah.
but they don't always do it. They may never do it.
Mm,
So the question to ask yourself, why would that be? You know,
mm.
Why would somebody who's listening to this have feelings about, oh, they know they should do something? Like, why don't they do it?
Right. It's a,
And so I have to say, like, my greatest discovery on my journey, which did lead to the book that I wrote, it was that there's a hidden subconscious part of yourself that doesn't think it's a good idea
mm,
to do what your conscious will thinks is what you want to do and what you should do, what you know you should do, what's the best thing to do. So what ends up happening, Asher, is that you have a conscious will, you have dreams and goals, you might have a journal where you're talking about all these things that you know you want to create or manifest in the world, right? But
mhm.
then what you don't know is that under the hood, in your subconscious basement, there's another aspect of yourself. Usually it's a younger version. It comes from something that happened in childhood along the way, or some lesson you learned from your parents or your grandparents or a teacher
Right.
that you learned it so long ago, you really don't realize that it's a lesson that you think you know, right? But there's a
Mm,
part of yourself that learned a lesson, and that part of yourself, that character that's sort of created, uh, doesn't think what you want to do is a good idea.
mm.
It thinks that it's going to lead to loss of some
Mm.
point. Now,
That
since
makes
it's
sense.
subconscious and since it has a younger intellect,
Yeah.
right? So it was formed, let's just use an example, when you were 5 or 8, So in other words, you learned a lesson when you were 8 years old
Mhm.
that you stored in your subconscious mind to say, hey, if this ever comes up again, like we've already been through this, this is how you handle it, right?
Yeah.
But it's coming from an 8-year-old mind. And so, maybe it's risk averse, or maybe whatever the lesson was painful. And it just said, hey, under all circumstances, just avoid pain, discomfort.
Yeah.
And so don't do that. Now, let's go back to you as a conscious person with these goals, and you're an adult now and you want to do things, and you don't know why you procrastinate or why you don't do it or whatever, because you don't realize this is other voice that barely is audible that is
Mhm.
saying it's protecting you from
Right.
making the same mistake again.
Yep.
But is it really the same mistake? You know,
Yep.
there's a chance it's not. But what's happened is that there's an internal conflict between these two parts of yourself. And so when that happens, the subconscious, the younger
Mhm.
personality trait, it's always going to win. It's always going to get its way.
Mhm.
Always. Like, you cannot overpower with sheer productive force or capacity or whatever. You can't overpower it. One is because you don't even realize it's there until you're listening to this conversation and considering it, right?
Right.
Uh, the other thing is it just knows you too well. And so it knows how to talk you out of it, make you procrastinate, give up, put it off for another day. It knows just right what to whisper to you at the right moment to say, yeah, yeah, no, today's not really a good day for that. And you go, yeah, no, it's really not. I'm not up for that. You see, and then you
Mhm.
just go about your business. And then, it doesn't happen.
Right.
Okay, so and look, this is for anybody listening, right? Anything that they've ever wanted to do that they haven't done,
Mm.
anything they're procrastinating on, any place they are in their life where they're stuck in some way and they just can't figure, like, why can't I break up to the next level? Like, what is in the way? I guarantee you it's an internal conflict.
Yeah.
And so, this is the most important thing I've ever learned in my life, that every 12 years, like clockwork, I would find myself on the wrong path for a little bit too long.
Mm.
Maybe it was just 2 years too long. Maybe for 10 of the 12, I was going in the right direction. And then somewhere, in that later stage, I would not really even realize it, but I would stay a little bit too long on the wrong course.
Right.
And then I don't know what your spiritual faith is or anything, but God or the universe would come and give me a smackdown of
Mm.
some sort, and just a wake up call,
Yeah.
either through a crisis or something crashing or failing, where I had to just really take an honest look at what was going on, and usually the message was, yeah, I'm staying on the wrong course too long. But the other odd thing is, it was also always related to an inner conflict that needed to be resolved.
Yeah.
And then now, if I could resolve the conflict and figure out what it was, then I would move on for another 12 years. Again, a little overshooting wherever I was heading
Mm.
until I had, another wake up call. But after this happened, a handful of times, I started just realizing, like, whenever I was stuck or not leveling up or feeling miserable or like my life wasn't going in the right direction, now I knew I could just go straight and look for the inner conflict.
Right.
So that's what I do now for people is I put them through my process, and I just rapidly find the inner conflict, because when I can help them see it,
Mm.
and almost, I don't want to say instantly, but it's as close to instantly as possible, is to resolve the inner conflict.
Yeah.
It's like overnight they don't become more disciplined. They're not a super version of themselves. They don't really, they're not more intelligent. They don't have any advanced degrees,
Mm.
right? The only thing they are different is that this inner conflict was resolved, and the
Yeah.
result, it's just miraculous. I've witnessed it, over and over again. So, the book is called "What's on Your Back Burner: Using Dormant Desire to Relight Your Fire." And it's almost all just anecdotes from clients, success stories, and just how we got to the answer, and what ended up happening with the people. But I'm just constantly, even though I know it works, just to see it over and over and over again, and just watch how fast people's lives change when the inner conflict is resolved. It's just truly jaw-dropping.
Right.
So I really just got to the point where, I remember I was doing a men's retreat where I was taking the guys through this process. And it was the first retreat I had done. And I really thought to myself at the time, I was looking for a way to deliver this work.
Mm.
And I said, well, I can go. I love public speaking. You and I met in Toastmasters, so I can give a speech, right? Or I could
Right.
sit next to a guy, while our kids were doing gymnastics or something. We could have a 2-hour conversation. But what I realized was I need a little more time with them to really make this stick and make them understand. And I ended up discovering a woman who was doing, women's retreats. And I just remember having the epiphany, oh yeah, this is what I need to do, a men's retreat.
Mm.
And the reason that I picked men at the time, Asher, is because I was sitting next to a lot of fathers, when my son did gymnastics. And no matter who sat next to me, whatever, they all really was telling me the same thing. And I started to just see everybody's lives as an inner conflict. I was like, oh man, I could really help you, like I know I could, because I could hear it in the way they talked in their language, almost even getting an idea,
Yeah.
where the inner conflict was. I said, man, if I had 3 days with them,
Mm.
I know. Uh, so I had my first retreat, and the first guy got up to bat, and his inner conflict was all related about his inner critic.
Mm.
Okay, now the guy is 50 years old at the time,
Yeah. That
and
one
so
doesn't go away.
as we explore, it turns out like his inner critic really came at 8 years old.
Mm.
And so for 42 years, his inner critic is telling him, how stupid this move is, how it's dumb, and you're never going to be able to pull it off. You're an idiot, you're a loser, you screw this up every time.
Yeah.
Okay, how hard is it to succeed when, if somebody else was standing on the sideline talking to you like that, you would never, you would break off all relationship with them. You would say, this person is so bad for me, right?
Yeah.
But when you're doing it to yourself, it's,
It's a little
it doesn't
different.
stop.
Right. It's not like you can just walk away from it.
No, I mean, it's there, and you're not even realizing this is what you're doing to yourself, you
Yeah.
know. So in this case, just to kind of color out the story, let people know like what's happening. The guy was a single father of two teenage boys. He'd been divorced from his wife for many years, and he was self-employed, had a videography business, but it was losing money. He wasn't making enough to raise his sons. He had started tapping the home equity in his house to be able to make ends meet, and he was really just up against the wall because it's just like going in the wrong direction. How much longer could he go? How much before all the equity was gone in his house and they said, hey, no, you've borrowed it all.
Mm.
And he had no idea what was wrong. But when we sort of discovered this troublesome character of his inner critic and started teaching him how to understand like what was actually going on and how to dialogue with this and see what this inner critic was all about, right there live in the retreat, he ended up having a 1.5 hour conversation with his inner critic.
Wow.
It was guided, and at the time, it wasn't me doing the guiding, but this is the skill I learned from another lady who was a mentor of mine.
Mm.
And I had been through so many of those sessions personally myself. That's what I wanted to share with these guys who showed up to this first retreat. It's like, yeah, this is the kind of work I've been doing, diving in and exploring these inner subconscious characters and seeing what they're all about and really just not trying to crush them, trying to
Mm.
come and understand them and what they wanted and what we had in common.
Right.
So here's the interesting thing, right? In the case that we're talking about now, the inner critic, it did want to be successful.
Mhm.
It wanted success, but its methodology on how to succeed was just unhelpful. It was kind of unhealthy.
Mm.
You see, so it wants the same goal to be achieved. It just has a inefficient way of achieving it. Like in this case, it had an 8-year-old's perspective on how to do it,
Yeah.
right? Subverting a 50-year-old's work life wisdom skill set. So here you have a 50-year-old and an 8-year-old with two ideas of how to get to the same place. And yet the 8-year-old version is the one that's going to get its way, just, kind of like a spoiled kid,
Yeah.
right? A parent who gives into a misbehaving child because it's easier.
Yeah.
And so this is what was going on with this guy. The 8-year-old was winning.
Mm.
But when he really truly realized that the 8-year-old wanted the same thing that he did, and that it could be a negotiation could take place where the 8-year-old was telling like what is the problem, like what the 8-year-old version of him wanted to avoid was big costly mistakes.
Mm.
And so its idea of how to avoid big costly mistakes is just not do it at all,
Mm.
which does work, right? I mean, if you
That's
don't
true.
take a risk at all, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for everybody listening, just so you know, this whatever this subconscious aspect of your personality is, it wants you to be safe. It wants you to survive. It wants you to just make it to the next round. That's all it's really interested in.
Yeah.
But at some point in your life, just surviving and not, taking any chances to be safe is no longer satisfying, And so that's where it's like, you want something and you want to do it and you got the urge and you think you're capable
Hmm.
and you are, right? But this protector kind of personality is coming in and say, yeah, no, this is not a good idea. You know, I don't think we should try this. Like, it could go wrong, it could go bad, we could lose money, we could be hurt, we could be hurt in a relationship.
Yeah.
And so it talks you out of it or sabotages you,
Mm.
and you don't have any idea why. Like, because you're not aware of this conversation is going on. Okay, so the guy makes a deal with his inner critic that they were going to work together,
Mhm.
right? It's like the guy's, the adult version of the guy, what his offer was is like, okay, look, you're right. I have screwed up a lot of things, and a lot of things have gone wrong. And so I probably should listen to your judgment and your wisdom sometimes because I have screwed up. So the deal was something like, well, what if I am willing to be a little more cautious and kind of consult you before I make big, stupid moves? But in exchange, you give me a little leeway here to like, we got to try something new because what we're doing is certainly not working. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And Asher, I'm not making this up. In the moment, so it's the same guy,
Mhm.
right? His body and mind, but to represent himself and the 8-year-old version of himself, we would just get him to stand up and sit in an empty chair facing where he was sitting. So he's talking to himself.
Mhm.
It's called Gestalt therapy. It's you're talking to yourself. You're getting up from one chair and getting down into the other chair. When he made the deal, it's like, okay, like give each other a hug, basically. So it's kind of the old, looking like that sort of. It's like, you're making a deal with yourself, but in that moment, I swear to you, some sort of an energetic shock wave just kind of shot out of that guy, and I just felt it breeze through me. It was just like a wind, an energetic wind that came out of that deal and just went in every direction from that room. And the other guys in the room who were witnessing this, now remember, this was going on for an hour and a half. This was a 90-minute conversation
Mhm.
with the inner critic. Like it went deep, it went long.
Mhm.
When that wave hit these other guys, they had just been sitting there watching. They couldn't hold on to it anymore. They just started crying, really in empathy for what they had just witnessed of, 42 years of pain and suffering that this guy had been going through. And it was finally released. So just from a human empathetic point of view, you know, we just had so much empathy for this guy
Yeah.
and hope now, you know. And so he left that retreat, and we had another one 3 months later. And at the time, what he was bringing was his trouble
Mhm.
was that he had two job offers. One was to go and become the communications director for the state of the lieutenant governor for the state of Louisiana, uh, making over, six figures, state car,
Mhm.
benefits, everything. The other was more in his the industry he was in. It was to go and do all the safety videos for a big chemical plant that was being built, and it was a $300,000 contract.
Mhm.
Okay, so 90 days before he was broke, tapped out, whatever. 90 days later, he was like, I can't believe this is all coming to me right now at the same time. Like if either of these opportunities had come to me 6 months ago, 4 months ago, even, I'd have thought, basically I won the lottery,
Mhm.
right? Now they're coming at the both at the same time, and he's got to make a choice. Do I take this big, huge pile of money and it's in my field and everything? But the downside of it was going to require him traveling during the week, and so he was going to be away from his two sons.
Mhm.
And then the other one really was his dream job. Now, where did this dream job come from? Where did both of these things come from? Once that inner conflict was solved, right? And the inner critic gave him a little bit more leeway in taking some chances. The chances he took was he applied for the job and he sent in a proposal on that contract. That's what he didn't do before.
Mhm.
See, that's what he was never going to do before while the inner conflict was there because the inner critic was saying like, oh, that's not a good idea for whatever reason.
Right.
Probably you're going to get a rejection letter from the state job, and then you're going to realize like you'll never be able to have your dream job. or you get awarded the other contract and you totally screw it up and ruin your reputation, then you never could be a videographer in town again.
Mm.
See, I'm not saying that's a specific what his inner critic said, but that's the kinds of things that it says
Right.
that keeps
It
you from
sounds
even
rational.
applying.
Yeah. Because it's like,
Okay.
why try? You protect
I
yourself.
try. Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to put myself out there.
Yeah. It's like it's not a good idea, not to the 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay, so but now with it resolved and his inner critic on his team,
Hmm.
he just put the application in. Like it doesn't set like you see what I'm saying? Like it seems so
Yeah.
stupid in a certain sense. It seems so simple, like, oh come on, like you saying he could have solved his problems just by going to put the application in. Yeah, he could have, he wouldn't have need to come to the retreat or anything, right?
Yeah.
And he could have just gone and done that, but he wasn't gonna do it.
Right. And even putting the application in isn't resolved, but that's not the thing. It's getting over that inner conflict to say,
He's
hey,
getting, yeah,
just doing the action and not having that constant do I not. It's like
exactly.
I act, and then in living it out, I get to dictate what goes on while still having that internal agreement with myself where it's these are the things I'm weighing out, and this is what I'm willing to compromise on. That makes a lot of sense.
You understand exactly why you're doing it or not doing it now, and
Yeah.
there's no resistance. The resistance leaves. You have clarity. You have
Yeah.
clarity of how to move forward. Okay, so
That gives me a lot of peace just hearing that and having our conversations for what we talked about just beforehand. And I'm guessing if someone is to get your book, they would get some of that. But to your point, I guess there's a benefit of like reading something when you're in the space where like, I want this information. Let me go get the knowledge, and then I can turn around and I can apply the knowledge. Otherwise, it's like you cannot read it, do nothing, stay where you're at. Or if you want to go a step further, like you say, be one on one and then take that 90-minute conversation and say, okay, how do I do this? And then that's a whole nother mode of commitment to where it's like, okay, I'm doing this because I want this result. And if I don't do that for that result, life is going to continue to teach me the hard life lessons that it does.
yeah, you're gonna stay until, like I did, overstaying my welcome on the wrong path until the pain is such that I'm forced to do something.
Mm.
Right. So that's really what ends up being the choices, honestly. It's like, yeah, life's going to come in and make it so painful that you have to change. So pain is the fuel to change.
Yeah.
And because it becomes less painful to take the chance to do something different than to stay where you are. Now, look, this is the biggest tragedy. A lot of people will just ride out in the painful situation for the rest of their lives. They'll never hit the crisis point that they need that just snaps them out of it. And so they just really will stay. I feel the most sorry for people who basically it doesn't get bad enough that it
Yeah.
remains tolerable.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a painful crisis, you're really in a worse situation because it's tolerable and you'll just stay there forever.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful in hindsight of my crises, these slaps from the universe. Well, the first one was three touches of the universe. Maybe
Mhm.
this episode is three slaps from the universe,
I
right?
like that.
It's just that, it's like, okay, man, I need a spanking,
Mhm.
to wake me up and get me to shift. But after, kind of discovering this um, kind of way to put it all together,
Mhm.
well, can I just preemptively just skip all the pain and, just do the work and, look under the hood here and find the character that's causing me trouble and just have a conversation, resolve it, and just instantly move on,
Mhm.
you know? So this is just what I do with people now. I set up a series of, conversations where the first thing I do is I have somebody tell me their complete life story.
Mhm.
Now, what's interesting is probably no one's ever sat down and listened to your entire life story. It's not like many people asking for that,
Right.
like, hey man, you know what? I want you to start at the very beginning.
Mm.
And but people love doing it. When you hear yourself really tell your own life story, a story arc appears that you never really even realized because you've never sat down to tell your whole life story.
Yeah.
But what happens, on my end by listening is I can just see how the patterns are set up, and I start to get an idea of like what's probably where, what life incident happened where that inner critic was born.
Mm.
Or sometimes it's kind of like a scarcity mindset, like a fear of poverty type inner
Yeah.
character. That's pretty prominent for a lot of people. It's like, oh, yeah, if I do this, it's going to cost me money and I'll end up losing all my savings. Or, I don't want to invest in myself, or I don't want to invest in this opportunity. I don't want to invest in this business. I don't want to invest in any kind of anything because in the past it's led to, you know, I
Yeah.
did all of it, I paid the money, and then nothing happened.
Yeah.
So like I've done this so many times. Yeah, don't fall for this BS, right? Don't spend the money. And
Mm.
that's the inner poverty character type, uh, talking you out of investing in yourself and growing and taking chances. Why?
Yeah.
Same reason as the inner critic. Like, this is too risky. You don't want to take a chance. You've done this before. Like, don't do it again. Don't that losing that money, wasting that money was so painful. Don't do it again. Now, you're just thinking you're being practical and pragmatic and, making a good decision. Yeah, you weigh in whether this thing is worth investing in or not. And you come to the conclusion that, yeah, probably not. Right. But
Mm.
is it you making the decision? No, it's this you know, inner poverty fear that's keeping you from doing it. And then, if you can resolve that conflict, you would just find yourself like taking chances and, investing in opportunities or starting a business or something. And it's the same as the other guy.
Mm.
Oh, so we kind of left an open loop there. The guy did take the state job.
Okay.
He said it had come up like years before and he didn't go for it and he just always regretted it. And so the thrill for him was that he had a second chance at it
Mm.
when he saw the opening. But the second time that, it was open, he took the chance and he got it. And he stayed in that job for 7 years.
Yeah.
And now here's the interesting thing. He kept his videography business because he had a lot of clients. Now, it wasn't enough to make a living, which is
Mm.
why he was going under, but it was enough that he was able to take that extra money and do those on the weekends
Mm.
and get himself totally out of debt.
Nice.
So he had his job, and he loved doing it. He loved, his main task was to like promote the state and tourism and stuff. He loved it because he loves Louisiana, and he's a
Yeah.
storyteller. I met him at Toastmasters. You
Oh,
probably
wow.
know him now that I'm thinking, I'm not going to say his name. You might already know who I'm talking about. But he's a storyteller, and so he got to tell stories for a living, you know,
Nice.
and his videography business was telling stories too, in a way, right?
Yeah.
And then he was able to keep that, and then all of a sudden, something that was kind of a weight around his neck became a saving grace. So, like, think about this. He didn't close his business down, or he didn't become a failure. The business that was failing turned out to be the business that completely bailed him out of his situation.
Wow.
Um, so you don't become a better version of yourself. You just do something and the inner conflict is gone and then it just happens and leads to its eventual cause and effect, conclusion.
Mm.
You just start making things happen. Uh, that's probably enough of a story. I mean, there's a whole chapter in there of my wife's story. Hers was more of on the inner um, fear of scarcity, really, a scarcity mindset.
Mm.
And she was an antiques dealer, and the way it was just manifesting was in the chances she took on buying something to resell.
Mm.
So she just wasn't taking enough chances because it was like she was telling herself, I can't afford this. This is too much.
Yeah.
And then when she resolved her inner character, like within a week, she was buying like never before. And all these things were things she was going to take to her antique store and sell for 5 or 6 or 4 or 10 times what she paid for them. So as
Mm.
soon as she got over her own inner scarcity that these things were too expensive and she got over that, she bought them and took them in the store and made, 10 times whatever she paid for them. And
Yeah.
and and she started just she just started succeeding like she had never done before. And she had been doing it at the time for probably 10 years.
Mm.
And now she jokes about she named that character, and that's one of the things we do in the process is kind of, give a name to it so it has a personification. So in her case, she named the character Petty Betty.
Mm.
Right? So Petty Betty was petty. She controlled the petty cash fund,
Mm.
and told her what she could and couldn't spend money on.
Yeah.
But when the deal that she made with Betty was, Betty wanted to be successful too,
Mm.
just like the other guy's inner critic. But her way, Betty's strategy to be successful was pay the rock bottom price or don't buy it at all.
Mm.
Okay, so you can't go wrong there, right? Like, oh, you get this thing for $5 and then you sell it for 50. All right, you can't go wrong. But if the person who's selling it wanted 20 for it, should you buy it for 20 and sell it for 50?
Mm.
Maybe so. Betty wouldn't,
Mm.
but it was a conversation between my wife and Betty to say, look, Betty, we can pay 15 or 20 bucks for this thing that you think should be 5, and we can still make money.
Right.
And guess what? When it sold for 50 bucks, then Betty went like, oh, okay, I see. Yeah. So my wife is sort of upgrading, the mindset of her inner scarcity character
Yeah.
to take more chances, and it wasn't long, a month before, then she's buying something that costs 200 bucks,
Mm.
right? That's a real risk, a real chance. Like,
Yeah.
man, I could buy this thing for 200 bucks and it might sit in my booth for 3 years, and I'm out to 200 bucks.
Yeah.
But she would oftentimes buy the thing for $200, take a picture of it, put it on Instagram, put it in her shop, and
Mhm.
within 24 hours, somebody would see it and come in there and pay 750 for it or 800,
Yeah.
She'd make 600,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And so it was miraculous.
Yeah. And that's a straightforward example because like you're saying, you're dealing with that inner conflict and it's something that's petty Betty's not wanting to spend $20. And then you go from, okay, we resolve the conflict, we come to an agreement, spend the $20. Now we're spending 10 times the $20. And then you actually have real-time results where it's like, okay, we can look up your wife's shop. Here's where the antique is. Here's the evidence on Instagram. It's not just kind of something that's a woo woo because like you said when you pointed back to the thing about coaching where everybody's a life coach or everyone's a guru or like social media makes things to where a lot of people can pretend and one of the things that has been a guilty pleasure of mine nowadays has been the being able to see people kind of get their comeuppance where all the people that have been the pretenders and whatnot, they're doing like the Gatcher, like docu-series, this person and like different personalities are doing it. They've got the visuals and everything. They've got graphics and things right there where there's like, really did the research to say, you've got to watch out for people that are like hyper charismatic. And then because you want to believe in something like that, and it might be I, I don't know what necessarily that may be if it's still in the same vein as this, but it's one of those things where it kind of comes into an alignment. And as you were talking, I was thinking back to like, where was I 12 years ago? And even having just gotten over a whole week of like long COVID and just being like, I'd never had it like this. I've only had it one time back when it first kicked off. And then here recently, it just became a whole thing where it's like I was out from work for the whole week and I was being hard-headed about it to where I didn't want to sit down. Like I worked from home Monday, was able to get permission to do that. And then um in trying to do other things, I was like, oh, I can't do the work there physically or be around people because I don't want to get anyone sick. But podcasting, I can do this from home. And then I'll set up more recordings. So when we were going to record, I scheduled 4 recordings in a day. And I was like, regardless what's going on, that's not smart. That's too much, like too much going on. I got 3 done, but like by the second one, energy was already dipping. But then I was like, oh, I'm finally figuring out how to use AI since I'm home. I've got the time. And it's like, I feel like I was negotiating some things with the inner conflict, but then there was that scarcity mind that was driving me to do 0 to 180. And it's like,
I
okay,
see. You
I've got
kind of
to
like,
do something while I'm not being able to do this other thing. It's like you have the permission to not work because you have paid time off. That is what paid time off is for. But then I'm thinking, I don't want to take off too much paid time off because then I won't have vacation. But it's like, hey, you're sick, sit down.
I see. So in other words, like for you, if and you tell me if I'm on to the right track, right?
Mm,
It's sort of like you feel like you have to be productive,
yes. And that
or
goes back to that child where it was like, this is what the standard is. If you're not doing this,
yeah.
you're
So in
not
other words,
meeting the
you
standard.
can't feel good unless you're because you're. If I'm gonna guess, right?
Mhm.
There's a part of you that thinks like if I slow down, right? If I'm not productive, something bad's gonna happen to me.
Right.
Okay,
And
now
the
think.
irony of it is that I move much slower than other people. Like I speak softer, speak slower. When it came to being in school, like all throughout middle school, high school, college was a little bit different because you could kind of do things to your pace, but you're sitting there taking notes. I'm always the last one taking notes. Like we're running track and field long distance. I'm fighting not to be last place or getting lapped by all the girls with me and another friend. And it's like, it's it works to my advantage where it's like that's my style where everyone else in my family is loud and it's like I'm quiet because I'm like, okay, hey, this is where I get to be protected. But then in doing podcasting and like needing to open up, listening back to myself and going through Toastmasters, be like, okay, here's the difference of what you're communicating to people. Yes, you're protecting yourself because of how you feel the world is too loud, but at the same time, no one can hear what you're saying because it's like if you're talking without moving your hands or anything like that, it's almost like nothing's going on, but just like a slight movement and people are like, "Oh, there's something going on over there. There's action. Let me go see." And it's like, "Oh, I didn't know all of that was in you because you always just kind of hid it away and you didn't want to share with anyone because you felt that you might get rejected." So it's instead of having that like 1 hour and a half conversation sitting down, I feel like I've been stretching it out in piecemeal bit by bit. And it's like from time to time, I'll negotiate because if I think back to 12 years ago to this day, I was going into my last semester before graduating college, 2013 at Tech. And it's the mindset was, hey, you did the co op, you did the transfer, you went from Southern Poly to Georgia Tech. The goal here is you want to graduate to get a job. You tried to do um, you thought about doing the undergraduate program to where you keep a 3.5 to get into the graduate program where you only have to take 1 year and then you have both your undergraduate degree and your graduate degree. But then it's like, I just missed the mark. So I don't qualify for the program. I have the opportunity now to graduate and go to work. But where I was working, it's at a cap ceiling. And what happened the semester before, I didn't like how that ended. So I need to find something that gives me a better opportunity and that gives me a chance to be outside of myself. Like I've got to go outside of my comfort zone. I met a company in the spring semester when we had our engineering, like civil engineering career fairs specific, like discipline specific. And then the same company, they were coming back in the fall. And I focus on speaking with them, but I made like a completely rewired effort to say, I've been to 3 years of career fairs since like my sophomore, junior, senior year. I've had no success. Like I had the one success to work here and I was happy to do that, but that's not going to be good enough to cut it. And then that's what led me to eventually move across to the Midwest for about a year and a half, where I eventually met you on my second work assignment. doing Toastmasters, where it's just like, hey, be proactive. Came from the Stephen Covey book, where it's like they gave us two books as part of our orientation. It's like, if you want to succeed, if you want to do well, this is your opportunity. Here are resources, and it's up to you. I read one of the books, and I was on the personal development kick to just say, okay, whatever it is that people think of me, I want to feel better about what I think of me. And then I've ever since then been doing a little bit here, a little bit there, but then I'll quickly pivot back or sabotage in order to deal with the, oh, this is, I don't want to do this because this is what's going to be thought of me. Like if
Yeah.
I fell here, I was called stupid at this one time at this age, and that's really personal to me. So it's like if I do something that's stupid, that label stays on.
Yeah.
So then when
So,
somebody says the opposite, I'm like, I don't know if I really believe that, because then if I mess up, it gives them the opportunity to relabel me again to be like, oh, that
okay.
was still
All
true.
right. So let's dissect this a little bit if you're, just to reflect back, like I'm on the right track, right?
Hmm.
So whenever that happened for the first time,
Hmm.
you're doing something, you're doing it like at your pace,
Right.
which is probably fine to get it done, right? Because everybody has their own way. And if personally, if you can get it to the outcome, it doesn't matter to me how you got there. It doesn't matter what side of the mountain you climb on to get to the top. Every side leads to the top.
Hmm.
Maybe you're, like you say, a day later than everybody else. Does that really, is that really important? But whenever this happened to you the first time, that your natural pace
Hmm.
that you're comfortable with, when you feel like you're being you, and then the outside world sent you a message somehow that, oh, Asher, this is stupid.
Hmm.
You know, you're stupid. You're a
Hmm.
failure, right? And you were just doing it at your own natural pace, but then you're like, what? You
Hmm.
know, this hurts my feelings.
Yeah. But then your feelings aren't valid because you're
Because
not
like
moving at the
well,
pace.
you probably didn't feel stupid,
Right.
but the world is telling me I'm stupid.
Hmm.
One representative of the world, right?
Yeah.
Whoever that happened to be. You may remember when this happened at whatever age. Do you remember the first time it happened and how old you were?
When we're speaking specifically about pace.
Just about where you realize that kind of like your own natural style was just being, critiqued by somebody thinking that it wasn't good enough or wasn't fast enough or it wasn't going to cut it.
Mm, trying to think back because I see different instances.
And look, it's gonna if you went back through, we could find it, maybe at 18, maybe at 17, maybe
Yeah.
at 12, you know, but there is an original time that it happened.
Yeah. Because
What
I guess the
would
thing
you
that
get?
comes back up to me is like more broadly, but more specifically, where it's like a reoccurring thing is in school when you're taking notes and then you're trying to ask questions and things. But like the way school's structured is you have this set amount of time, the teacher's
Yeah,
got to get through the lesson. And it's
yeah,
like you're just never keeping up. You're never fast enough. But
yeah,
then if you I guess there's that resource in school where it's like if you're a little slower, you can ask for more time, or but then you get a label put on you to where it's
yeah.
like,
Oh,
oh,
he's
you're
slow.
yeah, he's slow. So then it's like, okay, are you okay with being slow, or are you okay with getting the lesson to get what you need in your own
Well,
way?
what's important is to know that when you were kind of called out,
Hmm.
right, it was painful
Yeah.
or uncomfortable, both
Hmm.
disappointing, whatever. You were filled with a bad feeling, what you labeled as a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened at the time? So let's just guess. Were you under 10 when the first time this happened? More-
Probably. I
Yeah,
I would I would think I almost wanted to go back to like 7 because I was like that was the
7.
time in transitioning from coming to America.
Okay, so
So
is that
even maybe 7,
first
4,
grade?
5, somewhere in there. Like 7 would have been second grade. So that's like a dynamic shift of like, okay, you're in this new culture trying to learn the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
language. You
yeah.
don't know what's
Okay,
going on.
okay, perfect. Okay, 7. See, and this is what I'm telling you. This is what we're not we haven't even talked that long, right? And
Right.
this is like this is an inciting incident, right? Where one of
Yeah.
these characters is born.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of fascinating to me, right? When it happens, you're seven, and it's like
Mhm.
this hurts. Your survival instinct says, from now on, for the rest of your life, when any possibility of a similar situation comes up like this,
Mhm.
be aware for it, be alert. And when that happens, let's try to avoid the pain that we're feeling right now for the rest of our lives.
Mhm.
But think about that. You're seven, something's hurtful, and
Mhm.
you're saying, from now on, anything that looks like this, smells like this, tastes like this for the rest of my life, we should avoid it because this is painful.
Mhm.
Man, that's a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
especially like you're talking about. You have a natural pace to how you process information.
Yeah.
You know, you're processing it. My guess is you're processing it deeply,
Yeah.
and you're not only taking the information in, you're trying to, probably without even thinking about it, fit it in and attach it to your entire worldview. So when you're learning and you're absorbing information from the outside world, you want to truly understand not only what they're telling you, but how
Mhm.
it fits in with your whole model, your whole internal model of the world. Am I right?
Yeah. Because that's how I take school in, where it's like when I'm learning a lesson, I'm like, okay, well, if I'm doing calculus one, I want to understand it to where when it gets to the next level, like what I learned before makes sense. And
Yeah,
I'm not just
you
like,
really
just
know it.
right, right.
Okay, so
Because it's
let's
like
say,
if I don't know it, then I'm just like, what was the point?
yeah. Okay, so look, there could have been a student next to you, 7 years old too, right? They
Mhm.
heard the teacher and said, "Yeah, I got it," and moved on.
Right.
Now they got it. Maybe they just got the surface level information enough to get the question right on the test.
Yeah.
All they cared about was making an A.
Yeah.
And we could ask them now, and in a way, they're stupid,
Mhm.
right? Because they never really learned it. But everything you've ever taken your time to understand since you were seven, you really know on a deeper level more than anyone else, and could probably even explain it back or teach it yourself, right?
Yeah.
And none of that matters, even though, like, you see what I mean? All that matters to the 7-year-old version of yourself was that this hurt, and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right.
Okay.
Because to that point, if I fast forward a little bit from seven, where it's like you want this coming from a discipline of faith where it's raised Christian, like believe in God, believe in Christ. And the thing is that you always strive to be exceptional. You always strive to be the best. But then when you're met with other people that are better, it's kind of like, wait, like, so is my best not good enough? And if this person that's the best in the class gets it quick, 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 but I don't move at their pace. I don't know their life story. I don't know what they do at home. I don't know how long they've been studying, but I'm
Right.
trying to compare where I'm at to where I think they're at. And like our lives are not the same thing.
Yeah. So comparison is the thief of joy. I'm sure you've heard that line before,
Yeah.
But look, it's natural, it's human nature, because what you're doing from an early age, right, is you're trying to figure out how the world works.
Yeah.
And part of it is you figuring out what you can figure out, and the other part is taking in information from others. And so, you're putting your model together of how the world works. And yeah, it's just natural to see somebody else and like, wait a minute, like I like that about that person, man. They're just like grabbing it quick and they're getting it and they seem to know more. Like I aspire to that.
Right.
And it's not like happening for me exactly in that same way. You're only seven. Is something wrong with me? Maybe
Mhm.
because you're only seven. What do you know about the world? You're just getting into it. You see
Right.
what I mean? So you have the judgment and the intellect of just like a younger version of yourself that doesn't have the advantage of a long life lived, where you can say, okay, yeah, we all do it different.
Yeah.
However, you never think about this again
Mhm.
consciously,
Right.
because how many lessons must you learn by the time you're 8 years old? about how life works. You probably learned, 15, 20, 50 important lessons.
Yep.
If we tried to remember all of this consciously, oh, wait, remember that time when that person told me something and it was painful? Oh, and then this other time, this girl said something to me and I felt, humiliated. You would have to keep so many things conscious in your head to remember all the lessons you learned that you wouldn't have the bandwidth to function and get your work done or just operate in life. So what happens is your brain, your subconscious does a favor for you. It just remembers all these things as encapsulated lessons. And all you do going forward is just avoid all of these things without having to think about it.
Yeah.
Just like you don't have to remember to breathe, to keep breathing. It's just happening in the background. So you're going on with your life, not realizing that all of your subconscious lessons are playing out in your decisions from
Right.
then on. And this was really the revelatory moment for me, Asher. The thing that really drove me discovering all this myself at the age is because, I wanted to do public speaking.
Mm.
But in order to do public speaking, I had to grow. I'm putting myself out there. I'm taking, extraordinary risk of standing in front of a room of people and maybe making a total idiot out of myself, right? So
Right.
it's risky,
Yep.
right? But in order to do what I wanted to do, in order to share, the things I was learning, I had to stretch and grow in these capacities to be able to pull it off. And so what I was just finding was, yeah, it was just always one of these inner conflicts that was in my way. But at the time I'm telling you this story, I'm 48 years old.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking, could it really be it's my 7-year-old self?
Mm.
It's like there's some disbelief there that how could I have not gotten to the point of a 48-year-old grown man who was married, had children, owned a business, bought my own house. In other words, like I seemed like I had it going on,
Yep.
and yet the things that were holding me back in this um, goal I had was to do public speaking is related to my childhood. It just like doesn't seem like that really should be.
Yeah.
But when would you ever go revisit these things that happened along in your life and the lessons that you think you learned? There's really no time in your life where that would be what you would do unless life's not working for you.
Hmm.
And then what do? You end up in therapy or, you because something's not going right and you need an answer, you need help. So only then would you even have a chance to say go back and talk about your childhood or, how
Right.
your mother or father was mean to you or whatever, and you end up in therapy. So people wait for a crisis. Their life's not working. They get divorced, they get arrested, they get
Mm.
fired. That's when they go and try to figure out what the hell is going wrong,
Yeah.
right? Otherwise, you just stay where you are. I mean, I'm not saying you don't get promotions at work or move across the country to get a better job, but in general,
Hmm.
you've never really gone in to do this work. And so when I work with people, one of the things is there's a certain like, come on, man, can this really be it?
Yep.
Like it doesn't seem like it should be, but it's just like over and over and over and over again. Personally, it was always this,
Yeah.
as a grown man. I was like, okay, this is the problem. This is everybody's problem.
Yeah.
You know, okay, now that I know it, you know, what's the
Hmm.
most efficient way to help people, get through this? Because it's fairly easily to resolve.
Yeah.
It really is. It's fairly easy.
You know what's funny about that is that I feel like for me, you hit it on the head. And the thing that helped me grow personally, almost in leaps and bounds, is that every 7 years, is that I would have done something dramatically different that would kind of still work to my benefit. Going from like at age 7, coming to the US, and then at 14, starting my first job doing landscaping with a family friend. And then from there, at 21, getting ready to transfer from one college to another, and where it's like you're in your junior year, kind of wrestling with my older brother to be like, maybe it's too late. I'm comfortable here, but it's like, hey, you have more opportunity. And then 28, right there, struggling, kind of where I was telling you a little bit about before, where it's like, do I, don't I, trying to play the hokey pokey. And then opportunity shows up again for the second time. And I was like, let me take a leap of faith and go into it. So then from 28 to 35, is that 7? Yeah. So I'm right here at the third touch of the universe, so to speak.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you chose 7 years, for your cycle, right?
Mhm.
There's actually a lot of evidence that, yeah, most people do live their life in a 7 year cycle. My 12 years just happens to be it was it was it was 12 years between crises
Mm.
for me. Not necessarily I had a natural 12-year cycle. It's just
Right.
12 years I would get a hard enough spank that I had to do something different. However, I actually do one of the modules that I'll take people through. It's the 7 year life cycle
Mm.
process, and it's really fun. What you do is you write down everything you can remember between being 0 and 7, like your
Mm.
your early childhood.
Yeah.
Who was involved in your life, and what were you doing? Who were the characters in your life, and what were you up to? What are the incidents that happened?
Right.
And then you go from 7 to 14, then you do 14 to 21, and you do it for as many cycles as you've been around.
Right.
So there is psychological research that this is a thing. We do essentially live in these 7 year cycles.
Yeah.
What's really was is fascinating about doing that process is that when you get to the end, right? Even though in some senses you might feel like your life has rambled all over, when
Mm.
you look at it from this lens in retrospect, man, you really just see, again, a story arc that's just revealing itself. And you can see where you come from, how you got here, and likely where you're going.
Yeah.
People love it. I love it. I love doing
Yeah.
it. I love doing it for people because, a lot of times people do overestimate what they can do in a year,
Mm.
right? But man, if you look at life in a 7 year chunk, there's nothing you can't do in 7 years.
Oh no.
Now, you might not have the patience to say, "Oh, I don't want to wait 7 years." I'm just saying if you're methodical
Yeah.
and it's something you want to do or something, some talent you want to develop or skill, 7 years is more than enough time.
Yeah.
And then when you look at it and do like an exercise like I'm talking about, the 7 year cycle process, you realize that, man, you got a lot done in those 7 year chunks. You're like, oh man, that was really a pretty profound period of my life there. Uh,
Hmm.
so it's really fascinating to me that of all the time periods, you picked up one that has sort of scientific
Yeah.
backing as just
And
like a natural pace, right?
right. And the
Okay, and
funny thing
here,
about that is, oh, my bad. Go ahead.
well, and I would just wanted to tie it back into you, talking about slow,
Mm.
right? Or being a different pace. You're still on the same 7 year cycle with everyone else. Okay, go
That's
ahead.
true. No, no. I was gonna say, as you described it, um, one of the things that I found in doing like the personal development, I was introduced to someone like Dr. Jordan B. Peterson out of Canada, and a lot of what he talked about, I probably listened to like 9 hours or 12 hours of him talking on Joe Rogan and things like that. And I always I heard him talk about his self-authoring program, and like I'd started it, but then it was kind of frustrating when it's like I got to answer all these questions. But then when I would hear him talk about it, it would motivate me to go back because I'm like, oh, I feel like he's calling me out. It's like it's not me, he doesn't know me personally, but like that did enough as a tool to be like, okay, let me focus on my future plan and be like, I'm back home. I need to do something. Like my parents aren't going to be okay with me being under the roof after having graduated college, coming home, trying to figure things out. And it's like, I'm really not comfortable with that because it's like, I've lived a good life. I've been able to take care of myself. I can still take care of myself. It's just the motivation is kind of gone. But then being able to draw out a path or like a goal to say, hey, here's where I want to go. I don't even know how I want to do it. And again, having that like perfection type thing where it's okay. You don't have to write, don't worry about the spelling. Like my mom's a teacher, so even my dad, like whenever I speak to them in French, my French has gotten worse and worse and worse the less I speak it. But every time that we're having a conversation, it's always like correcting grammar. And it's like there's that constant correction where it's like, crap, well, do I even try or do I just not? But then when I had the freedom to be like, okay, I'm coming up with my plan, I can make as many mistakes, have all the misspelled words, even if it comes out like just the letters on the keyboard are just all jumbled up. I do it for 15 minutes. That's all I'm doing. And then if I want to read it back, I can read it back. But then when I look at the indexing, it's like, okay, here's a summary of it. I can go back and be like, okay, that didn't quite make sense. Oh, okay, well, I get the general idea of what I was saying. And then when I looking at here's where I want to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or a year, 2 years, 5 years, and I look back at it and I'm like, I did every single one of those things and more. And then looking at the past authoring is the same thing. Do it in 7 year chunks. And then they call it like epochs, where it's
Right.
here's how you can tell the story and just give your life story. And then to your point, it's like when you can sit back and look at it and be like, huh, okay, like
It's
this
making
same
sense.
thing, it
You-
makes sense. And it's,
You're pulling back enough where your life makes sense
yeah,
from a little bit, far objective distance.
right, right.
Yeah, so that is a big commitment to do his program. That yeah, it is a lot of writing and thinking, and you got to make a lot of decisions and say what you want. The
Yeah.
one thing I'm picking up out of the way you're talking about it, is I can hear you really talking about a perfectionist inside, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so again, another character, the perfectionist, and it was born
Hmm.
somewhere along the line. You were told, or you realized in a lesson. If you remember how old you are, throw it out there
Yeah.
while I talk about it. Do you know already where it came from? The incident where the perfectionist was born. Do you know?
Where perfection is born. I'd probably have to go to like my earliest memories when it's like 4, 3 years old,
Okay,
somewhere in
so
there.
super
Just
young.
like, yeah, just like being raised in the house. This is a standard that you want to
Okay.
be.
So it
It's
came
like
from
the,
your parents then,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay. So parents expected, they had high expectations for you.
right.
And so, in other words, I mean, okay, now think about this, Asher, right? So let's just say 4 years old, because most people
Hmm.
can say, okay, three, you don't even know what the hell's going
Right,
on.
right.
At 4 years old, what you're learning about the world from the people who your survival is totally dependent on, your parents.
Hmm.
These people are gods in a sense, right?
Yeah,
Because whether you live or die really depends on these people.
yeah.
And they're saying, hey, this is how you have to do it, or you're not good enough.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, if you ever did anything that wasn't good enough and they told you,
Yeah.
right? Just like the somebody commenting that you were slow
Hmm.
is going to be painful.
Yeah.
Maybe even more painful because it's your parents, it's these people who you need. You
Yeah.
need their love, their everything. And so they're saying, hey, this is just not up to our family mark,
Hmm.
right? And then you feel less than. And now look, this is exaggerated, right? But from a 4-year-old's point of view,
That's how it
there's
feels.
there's something about like my survival
Hmm.
is dependent on hitting this mark that is set for me
Hmm.
by these people who are totally in charge of me being able to make it or not.
Hmm.
Okay, think of how critical that is, right? In
Yeah.
other words, your entire survival, your life is depending on meeting a certain expectation.
Yeah.
And that if you don't, how
That's it.
painful is it to starve to death or be excommunicated from the family? You see, again, this is not rational, but this is kind of maybe what a 4-year-old mind is how it's seeing it.
Hmm.
But the intensity of that, the importance of that, the exaggerated importance of that is like burning in so deep on your operating system. It becomes a foundation for how you're going to see the world for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Even if it's not helpful.
Yeah.
You with me?
Yeah. I'm with you.
Okay, so in other words, you're not thinking that this is what you're doing. You may describe yourself, and look, believe me, there's plenty of people listening to this who would describe themselves as perfectionists or at least trying to be trying to be perfect, doing everything right. So you're describing yourself in a positive light, like, oh, I do good work, I do excellent work, I always do excellent work. I mean, that sounds like a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, now the part you may not tell someone else is like, I'm driving myself to the brink of insanity in order to do good work. And
Yeah.
I don't know how long I can keep this up. And I might crack soon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like
Because
the
it's like,
cracks are just starting to form
well,
around.
it's
It's like
just
just
because
keep it together, keep it
it's just
together.
so tied into your own ability to survive, even if it's not true, but it's just been hardwired into at the deep level of your operating system that you feel like that even if it's not true.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Okay, so here's this character inside, right? A 4-year-old. Now you're a grown man
Hmm.
trying to deal with a 4-year-old in control of how much you pursue excellence and perfection.
Yeah.
Okay, man, hey, you can start to, you're probably starting to see the trouble people can get into with all of these things. These are all pretty universal and basic.
Yeah. I've gotten
And
myself into some trouble, all right. And it's like, huh. And that's who the culprit was this whole time.
yeah. Okay, so have you seen the movie Inside Out?
Yes, that as we were talking, that's what I keep thinking about because this time last year is when the second one came out, 10 years from the first one. And I was like, I went with with a friend that I was telling you about and some family friends. And at one point in there, I was basically crying like tears of relief where it's like, yeah, that describes my life
What's
in
happening? Yeah.
some regards. And like being able to see that on the screen, but then also having this conversation to where it's like, oh, I can have that dialogue
Okay,
now.
I do think that's what was, I want to, somebody just recently told me, I was doing another interview and
Mm,
it was a younger person and they said, "Oh, have you seen In and Out?" Yes, I did with my kids.
mm,
And I don't think I've seen the In and Out too, but they say it's more complex, as a teen. So really it's the next up on my movie watching list because I want to go see how they handled it. And you tell me if you remember the second version.
yeah,
Uh you know, my take on it is, at least in the first one, was all these characters were kind of running the machine, right, in the control tower. But I don't know if the person itself, the real the person in the movie, well, I mean, I know it's a cartoon, but
yeah,
did that person ever dialogue with any of these inner characters, or the inner characters just were in control all by themselves?
yeah. It's always the inner
Okay.
characters are in control and they kind
All
of
by
like,
themselves, right? And
yeah,
you're clueless. Like you're at the helm, but you have no idea who's running the down the engine.
yeah,
Okay, that's really what it is like. You have you don't know why you're making all the decisions you're making.
mm,
It's those different, emotions and stuff inside that they're saying or just working out the whole show. And you're just almost like along for the ride. Okay, so what I'm offering here
mm,
is, what if you go down there into the engine room and start talking to these people
mm,
and negotiating with them and working things out to do it different? This is what I'm talking about.
yeah,
This is the game changer. This is it, Asher.
right,
This is my discovery of doing my own work and sharing it with others. That you can go into the system and you can change it at that level. Again, fairly easily with an hour and a half conversation. Like, that's not asking too much in my mind.
right,
You can really go down there and just have a talk with these, inside out characters and make a new deal with them. And it's a game changer.
yeah.
So I'm definitely going to watch In and Out soon, In and Out 2, because yeah,
Inside Out.
I want to just see if they address that all that you can talk to them.
I think, well, when I think about it, I think that is when the breakthrough comes in. I may have to go back and watch it too because a lot of the focus is on the characters, but
Yeah.
then something has to happen for the characters to shift what they're doing.
Yeah, and come together. And they might all agree that it's in their best interest to do it, but
Right.
without the input of the person itself.
Right, right. Because
What
that's
I'm
ultimately what it comes down to, because it's like, okay, with this last one, you have the emotions where each one has their personality, and then maybe one thinks that it needs to be the forefront. But then when that emotion is confronted, it sees, oh, it's not about me, it's about the
a
main
whole,
character, Riley. It's like
yeah,
it's about the main system. It can't just be my thing.
yeah.
Every other thing here has to have a role.
Okay, so that's just assuming these characters are gonna, have an awakening of their own
Right, right.
and help you out. What I'm saying is the person has to have the awakening.
Right.
And when the person has the awakening, and then you realize it is within your power, you can go meddle in here and you can significantly change things.
Mm,
And I promise you, when you do, when the inner conflict is solved, you will not 30, 60, 90 days later, you will just be in a different realm that you didn't even ever think was possible, whatever. It's literally that miraculous when people do this, when they address this. Look, I didn't make all this up, really.
mm.
This it's shadow work. If you've ever seen that term before, you
I've
might
heard the term.
you might know that this is your shadow is those characters that you don't realize that they're there
Mm,
in the in and out. Those are shadow characters. So the Carl Jung, Jung, he was
mm.
the psychologist who really wrote the manual on this. But the problem with it is it's if you go try to even if you listen to a lecture of his,
Yeah,
it's so deep it's hard to grasp. And
yeah.
so it's not accessible for mere mortals. But it's so useful
Mm,
that essentially what I wanted to do was boil it down in the same way that the producers of In and Out tried to make, understanding the complexity of emotion so that people would understand their emotion in the same way. I wanted to do the same thing for shadow work is how can I make it where I don't have to read a psychology textbook that's, 800 pages thick to be able to take advantage of this knowledge, right?
right.
How can I just make it so simple and so easy to understand and just give people a process that they could just either do on their own or do with guidance that would just rapidly shift any obstacle in their way. The biggest obstacle that's in their way right now, the biggest way they're self-sabotaging themselves
Mm,
right now. They're the biggest place of a lack of understanding of how you operate as a being, right? All that can just really be easy to understand if it's just explained in this kind of simplistic way, but also then to be used as a tool to do something intentional with
mm.
it. And so that's really what I've done. And that's what I'm offering, people to, get the book.
Right.
You
And
mind
you
if I
have it.
plug where to get it,
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. And I'm
So,
gonna grab it myself because as you're talking about it, I was like, if you got it on Amazon, I put The Power of Ted in my shopping cart, and as soon as we finish with this, I'm ordering them both and putting it on my bookshelf.
so yeah, it's on Amazon. It's called What's on Your Back Burner. And but you can also go to backburnerbook.com
Mm,
and there's just a link on there that takes you to Amazon to get it. So if it's easier to remember, backburnerbook.com. And yeah, all I can say is I realize that, well, I'll say this,
mm,
I always did this work in a guided methodology where I was doing it at a retreat or an online workshop or
mm,
individually. And I wasn't sure if people really could do it on their own.
mm.
I said, well, because you got to kind of explain it a lot. And
Yeah,
so, if I'm in a 3-day retreat, they're getting a lot of explanation to understand why this is working and what are we really doing. You really got a lot out of this conversation.
yeah, I
You
did.
and I explain it. I mean, it's not that hard to understand, really, but I'm explaining it to you. I really wonder, like, could people do it on their own? So I wrote the manuscript, and one of the things you do when you publish a book is you get people to read it to see if it makes any sense. You know,
Mm,
like, does this make sense to you? Can you do these exercises in here on your own without guidance, without calling me and saying, Albert, I'm stuck here, whatever? Like,
mm,
so will it work for somebody who just read the book and did the exercises? And so you give it out to people. So I gave it out to a half dozen people, maybe 8 people. And one of the first guys who finished reading it and came back to me, this is what he realized was driving him. You know, he's a physical therapist, has his own practice in California, and he was developing an app that would connect, say, people who are stuck at home but need physical therapy
mm.
with physical therapists who are finished for the day or have a day off,
Yeah.
and they would come do private work. So in other words, like the Uber for physical therapists, right?
Oh, nice.
He's developed an app. So he's working a regular job, running a company, and then he's trying to do this on the side. So
Mm,
he reads the book and he said, you know what it made me realize what was driving me was that the reason I was working so hard was to prove to my ex-wife that she made a mistake by leaving me because I'm
mm.
going to be a big success one day.
Right.
So I said, that's interesting. Okay, that makes sense. Will she know when you're a big success? And he said, no, she won't. Like, we have no contact. I don't even know what state she lives in.
Mm,
Okay, so here was the moment when this is the first person who just went and read the book on their own, and they came back and told me prior to reading the book, they did not know this about themselves.
yeah.
And they read this, you know, not thick book, right?
Yeah.
They read this not thick book, and he comes back and he's driving himself to the brink of, exhaustion to prove to someone who's no longer in his life that she made a mistake
Mm,
and neglecting his current wife.
mm.
And so that's the moment when I said, you know what? Yeah, this has got to go out, you know. And surprisingly, I had resistance to putting it out, just like everything else we're talking about. It's like that manuscript sat on my desk for 4 months. The publisher was begging me for all this information, and I was procrastinating on it. And I was like, I know I could use my own methods to figure out why I'm procrastinating on this book.
Mm.
And I didn't do it because I didn't want to know, because I didn't want to. I had an inner conflict.
Yeah.
So it's like whenever you're procrastinating, whenever you're not doing something you know you should be doing, it's an
Yeah.
inner conflict. And I knew I had the tools to discover the inner conflict, but whatever my saboteur was at the time was so insistent on getting its way, like I didn't do my own process.
Mm.
So this is how crazy it is. You asked me before, oh, you have you been productive for the last 12 years? I'm human just like everybody else. I'm
Yeah.
still not gonna 100% do everything I'm supposed to do. The only difference is now that I know that I can go in and dig under the hood and find the character that's responsible and have a conversation, and then I will be moving along
Mm.
after that. So I did exactly that. And what it turned out to be was it took me, really 12 years to come up with all this information and be able to present it in a way that made sense to people.
Right.
And at the early part of that 12 years, I was in my early 50s, and I really wanted a robust career and do this full time, right?
Mm.
But now I'm 62. And so the inner conflict was, at my age now, I didn't want to be working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and, flying off to, go speak at conventions and things and be gone all the time. Like,
Mm.
I just didn't want that full of a career experience anymore.
Right.
And so in my mind, what the inner conflict was all about is there was a part of myself that believed that if the book came out, my life would just become that,
Mm.
and that I had no choice in it, and that it wasn't something I wanted.
Mm.
And so it was getting me to procrastinate on sending the book in because it was going to lead me into a life of exhaustion and travel and overwork.
Right.
You with me? And
Yep.
so, but I was able to say, oh, okay, it doesn't have to be like that. I can just do this at my own pace. I can take it as slow as I want. That suits me.
Right.
The same as you can make that decision about whatever work you do. It's like, you know what? I can do it at my own pace. Like I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so the moment that inner conflict was solved, within days, my publisher had everything he had been begging me for months for. And then the book was boom, boom, boom. It was on Amazon. It was a launch party. It happened. But I wouldn't send this damn manuscript in to the publisher that I had paid to work for me,
Mhm.
for the editing, right? And it sat there on my own desk because of an inner conflict.
Yeah.
So no one is immune from this.
I agree with that.
This is, I hate to be like, now I'm a hammer and everyone I see is a nail, right? I just got
Yeah.
one solution for everybody, but it's everyone's problem.
Yeah.
Like, I know it now that it really is,
But
so
I like how you led because in the beginning of our conversation, I don't think you really promised anything to say, hey, this is what you must do. This is how this will work. But it's like you pointed to things that have been problematic, things that haven't worked. And we both talked through challenges of our own that have been sticking points because even when you have the answer, you know the answer, you had to work your own solution and kind of look at, okay, well, the pain has to be great enough for me to make it so. And saying it's a solution for everyone, it's like it may be, but it's only going to be a solution for the one that chooses it and decides to work through it. Because
right,
if you don't, then you don't. And I mean, that's I think that's part of the thing I'm understanding about being able to do this podcast where it's like, okay, and how I went about it, I'm happy with that because even as you were saying different things and like the perfection thing, that was the number one thing I had to let go of because I'm like, editing isn't my strength. It's not something I want to do. And I was like, okay, what can I do? I can just put it out as I record it and then try to edit in my presentation, like practicing Toastmasters. And
I
it's
see.
I can go back through the manual, but then I can work to pause and actually think through what it is that I'm saying. And then I can do the introduction like we did, like welcome you in. And that was a suggestion I got from my younger brother where it was like, hey, you just hit record. And I was like, well, Joe Rogan did it. So, but then it's like, okay, well, that's him. He's got a platform doing that. This is me. And it's like, even if no one knows me, in order for someone to know what they're getting into, it's like, hey, just like welcome them in, like be courteous, like some common things that we learned growing up. And then being able to take the perfection angle away from it, which is what I keep circling it back. But now that you kind of brought my attention back to it, it's like, why do I want this to be perfect? Where it's like I was fighting the urge when we said inside out, and then you said, I think you maybe mispronounced it. It's like I wanted to correct, and then like I did once, but then I was like, why am I doing that? It's like leave it alone. Like people can figure out what we're talking about. You can
Yeah.
put it in the subtitle later. It's like people don't need you to like baby them. Like they can figure it out. Like
Yeah.
it's okay.
It's,
And
the urge is, I mean, you know what? I think it's because you care.
yeah,
It's,
yeah,
it's the bottom. You want it to be as good as it can be.
yeah. But
I do too. I don't want my
the
kids to do as good at work as they can do, but
right.
does that mean it has to be perfect to have some value or help people? No.
But I think the thing that I was trying to get to is that how you don't become a hammer and everyone is a nail. It goes back to that word of negotiation, where it's like, hey, we understand that we have a conflict, we have a problem. Let's talk about it. How do you see the problem? How do I see the problem? How can we meet in the middle and shake hands?
Right.
Because if we don't have that conversation, it's a constant avoidance of like, they're trying to hurt me. I'm trying to protect me. They're trying to hurt me. I'm trying to protect me. And no one's coming to my aid. But then it's like going back to that power of Ted, it's that you have the victim triangle on the top, which is in order to be a victim, you need a perpetrator or a persecutor and you need a rescuer. So you need a way out. If you have someone that's constantly rescuing you from the problem, the triangle continues to work in itself. But the only way you get out of the victim to the victor mindset is that you need to be coached or taught. You need to be open to coaching or teaching, and you need to be open to challenging. So it's like unless you're able to make that shift through negotiation, you get stuck in that mindset of
That's
I'm stuck.
interesting. Yeah. Uh, right. Until you negotiate. So the way I describe it is you turn your adversary into an ally.
Mm,
So as long as you have an internal adversary, you're right, that machine is going to keep going around in a circle where you have these two forces working against each other.
yeah.
The negotiation turns your adversary into your teammate,
Mm,
and that's how you're breaking that cycle.
yeah.
What work is that, the triangle? That's just a classic victim triangle,
Yeah,
right?
it showed up in the book. I think it was Miss Nancy Graby. She's a friend of mine. I went to college with him and she's his mom and she works in like family therapy. And it was one of the things where we kind of we identify with the same perspectives when you go to like the Myers-Briggs or DISC assessment where it's like you have the extroverts, introverts, and like the introverts that seem to be a little bit slower pace, or some people may be um but it's like you might be processing slower, but you're thinking deeper as to
Yeah.
where when you're running a race, like the fastest person always gets the prize, where it's like whoever can spit out the answer quick, like that's who gets the recognition. And it's like, yeah, we don't want to deal with you. Like you ask too many questions, but then it's like, okay, in asking a lot of questions and in slowing down, it allows us to be able to listen. And actually, when someone's talking, it's like, okay, if someone wants to talk for 45 minutes, I can sit quietly and listen and give them the space that they need because that's what I would want someone to care for me to say, okay, if I can devote that and say, hey, this is your time, be open. Like you might be getting this is going on in the news, or they're telling you this, they're telling you that, they're telling you this, but it's like, hey, when you come here, you get to block all of that out and make time for you, even if you have it playing in the background, like kind of ignore everything else that's going on and take care of like your space and your in your own way. Like that's been kind of my goal, and being able to do that and actually slow down in the times that I'm slowed down when being sick. And like you said, kind of like a crisis moment, it kind of clears things up to be like, I'm not really doing this to my advantage. I'm trying to speed up to keep up with things I'm not meant to keep up with, and it's working to my detriment. And all these things that I thought I needed, or I needed to do this to be secure in it, it's like I've got a lot more than I've got all that I need now, and I can make room for more because it's like I can see the picture laid out and kind of to what we were talking about before. And going back to that 7 year old, the 4 year old, the 12 year old, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. That's who I'm trying to please. Kind of like, hey, parents need to be okay with this in order for it to agree. But it's like, okay, if I take that away where it's I'm not going to meet that expectation, but I'm going to compromise to meet what it is that I need internally to be okay with that and to go forward. It's like, yeah, the decision is simple and I'm good with the
Yeah. So,
decision that I'm making.
essentially what you're saying is I'm going to set my own rules.
Yes.
And I'm give up the ones that I adopted from others who early on told me that what I needed to do in order to be successful and happy and whatever. And hey, they did it in a loving, caring way because that's what they figured out they needed to do in order to succeed. And they're just trying to share their wisdom with you. It's like, hey,
Right.
this is what worked for us, and so you're our kid, or I'm your teacher, and
Yeah.
you're my student, and so I'm gonna share with you what I've found is the best way.
Mhm.
But at some point, you're taking ownership of like, oh, you know what, that may have been the best way for them, but the best way for me could be different. And now I've kind of lived long enough to have tried a bunch of different things, and I can be okay just defining my own parameters for how I want to do it, what is success to me. And
Mhm.
this is really taking the ownership back. uh, the reason it is challenging is I don't think anybody's thinking that this was accidentally infused into them at a younger age.
Mm.
It's inadvertent.
Right.
And it could be as simple as just a story somebody tells,
Yeah.
you know, and you just absorb it as a kid, as a point of view. And then you don't think about that that's where that came from.
Yeah.
But it's because I mean, look, we're born, right? Little tiny infant helpless babies, and somehow all of the information that we assess about our world is it's a lot of it's just coming from other people
Hmm.
as we grow up and try to figure out our own what we think, what we believe. But man, we are absorbing a lot of other people's ideas on what should and shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And over time, yeah, adulthood and success is about figuring out what works for you and what your natural strengths and gifts are.
Right.
So yeah, it's letting yourself off the hook. One of the greatest things somebody told me, a coach one time was like, "What, Albert, you don't have to have your shit together all the time." And I was just like, I don't. Like it was really a surprise to me. Somebody was saying this to me.
Yeah.
And they were giving me permission that I don't always have to have it together. And what a gift that was. Just really, yeah, I remember thinking, oh, okay, wow. I don't have to have it together. Now, again, I'm absorbing somebody else's idea, right? I don't have to have all, but man, I tell you, it was something that really worked for me
Yeah.
is to just say like, okay, I'm not saying it's bad to have your act together,
Yeah.
right? But you don't always have to have it together.
Right. I
So
think
when
that's what freed me up to even finish up that authoring program where it was like, okay, like I'm not going to get this done all in 1 month, 1 year. It's like I did it in piecemeal for what I needed. And then once it was done, it was done. And even in trying to go back to it, it was like, why? Like, what am I trying to solve for again? I could, but then it's like sometimes things are there for a reason and a season. And then
yeah,
you just move on. You don't have to keep
yeah, you don't have to
trying to
keep
like
going.
redoing the mousetrap.
Now, I do have a client that has done that every year for quite a number of years. I mean, it's quite a commitment. He turned me on to it. Now you got me curious. I want to see. I wonder if Jordan Peterson's website remembers you, and I could go back on there and see how far I had gotten
Yeah.
and what I
It
wrote.
so long as you still have your password, you log in, it should still keep a history.
Yeah, so I'd be curious about that. So that's episode 2. I'm thinking, Asher, what do you say? I know we go on a long time. I hope people are still in there and got that, but
Yeah.
I've never quite explained things in the way I did today. So I really love the opportunity to be on here and say it the way I said it. I'm always learning by sharing.
Mhm.
I get more clarity myself.
Nice. I like that. And I'm grateful that you took the time to really explain it and tell it in story form to where we were able to dialogue a little bit before and it's like, uh, I don't know if I want to put myself too much out there, but then in being able to have still tangible examples and then I was still able to kind of open up and tie to something even earlier where it's like, okay, I think that age, this thing may be what's affecting me here in the present. And it's like, okay, as we talk, I have been able to put the things down and be like, oh yeah, I don't have to carry that weight anymore. And then I'm talking to myself internally while I'm listening to you, but just like in short bits to say, hey, you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be perfect today.
No.
This recording, this conversation was smooth. And I'm glad that it happened now instead of being sandwiched in between three other conversations 2 days ago, because that
That's
would have been
good.
horrific.
Yeah, you're right. See, so it is all meant to be, right?
Yeah.
Divine order.
But the thing that's hilarious about it as we're closing is like I was telling you about thinking back to the third touch of the universe and being able to tap into what I learned back then from my first job, and even going from the first job that I did to being able to render that service to someone that I care for, and being able to show, like, even through a picture, and then going by the airport to bring her home to be like, hey, look, this is what it looks like. And then whatever your next vision is, you can cast it here and make it your own. Like we can get rid of the other stuff. And because I'm trusting myself and who I am now and what I know, I can be more open to share that. Because for the longest time, it's kind of like I've tied myself so much to my work that my life didn't really happen outside of the work.
I
And
see.
now, with work being so secretive or classified in ways, I kind of classified parts of my personality in my brain to where it's like, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. But it's like, I'm around people that are other adults that know what to say and what not to say, and they don't kind of blend the two. It's like they have families, they're expressive, they're personable, they're engineers, they have hobbies, they like football, they like cooking, eating, these different things. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like either straight laced or just wild out party out of
Yeah.
control for us. It's like you're human and you're getting to do this. And I'm like, okay, hey, it's okay. You were told you had to be perfect before. In this instant, that's not what's going to work. And I'm giving you permission to figure it out. And then I just feel so much more natural talking to you on the mic or just talking to you even virtually to be like, I feel like we're sitting at a Toastmasters meeting or outside of Toastmasters, we're grabbing a coffee and we just sat
Yeah.
down Sunday morning and just really had a good dialogue.
Yeah, no, and hey, I'm just gonna throw this one wrinkle in there because this is what I do. I listen and I pick up things. I notice, this has come up 3 times in our conversation. You your tendency is all on or all off.
Yep.
It's like you have 2 gears.
Yep.
And so really what you're saying is, are there some other gears in between these? It's like you have a 10-speed bike and you either have it on one and you're cranking your legs hard, or you got it on 10 and you're cruising, but not realizing there's 2 through 9 in there, man. You can go up the mountain, on a 10, whatever, crank down to your second gear and go up the mountain. And then when you're going down the mountain, you switch to eighth gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a lot more gears available to you, Asher, than you're just naturally going for. You have a
Hmm.
natural tendency to go for 1 or 10.
Yeah. Hmm.
A lot of speeds
I'll
in between.
take that. I'll take that. There's a lot more to me than, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot more to me.
A lot more gears to explore with you.
Awesome. Well, I guess we'll end it on that note, but thank you again for doing this podcast with me. And I think people will find a lot of value in this. It may be out like Valentine's Day, February time, so it'll be a good pick me up winter time.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity as always.
Yes, sir.